Hello, everyone. This is Kathy Goshtaspi, and welcome to another episode of the Kathy G podcast. Specifically, this podcast series is Women Lawyers Making a Difference. So, the mission of my podcast is for us to realize that we really do have greatness within us and that we can be even greater. And most importantly, how are we going to bring this greatness that we really own and know to the world through our brand? So I do this podcast for two reasons. I care deeply about humanity and I want us all to see how great we really are so we can be happier and sleep better at night. And because I am just like you, I struggle with my own feelings of being less than and all the stuff that's going on that gets in the way and the blocks, just like everyone else. So some days are good, some days aren't. And our guests are here to really enrich us and show us their perspective and to leave us with points of views that we can learn from. And so this time, the podcast, we're really blessed to have my friend Tiffanie Clausewitz. I think I said that correctly. She is in San Antonio, business lawyer. Welcome, Tiffanie.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here.
Thanks for joining me. So Tiffanie and I met not that long ago, actually.
Yeah.
She's probably the guest that I have. No, I've known other guests less longer, for sure. But I feel like I've known her forever because we've been corresponding and all this because of a
Yeah.
program she's got that she reached out to me on. And I thought, what a cool program. She needs to be on this podcast so we can educate women lawyers what's going on and maybe like other bars or other city lawyers could pick it up and run with it and figure it out or make some kind of a, imitation is the best form of flattery.
Right.
Somehow learn from what you guys have learned. But we'll get there in a minute. But that's how I know Tiffanie. So Tiffanie, tell us your story and your background and whatever else you think we should know about you, but don't know about you.
Sure. So, won't go through from the beginning of time story, but I did grow up in a small town in South Texas. I went to Texas A&M for undergrad, and at that time, I was looking to go to college somewhere that would pay me to go there. So that was how I was going to go to college, right? I'm the oldest of four. And so I knew that there were three behind me. And so I ended up going to Texas A&M here in Texas on an academic and leadership scholarship. And one of those funny things that when I started school, what do I want to be? What I want to be? And I think it was my mom that said, you should get an engineering degree because there aren't many women in that, and it would be helpful for scholarship opportunities. And she was right. Now, mind you, I had no idea what engineers did. So, and A&M is one of the premier engineering institutions in the United States. So I went to Texas A&M on an engineering scholarship. Did that for a year. Engineering, but on a scholarship. Did that for a year, didn't like it. Switched to business for 2 years, and really it was at that time I was playing with pre-law, but ultimately decided I didn't really have the confidence at the time to go to law school. So decided not to do that, and I called my parents about right before my senior year and said, I don't know what I want to do with my life. This is blah 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 blah. And they said, Tiffanie, you have 1 year of your scholarship left. Pick a major and get a degree, which I did. So I got an English degree of all things. And if you're from Texas and know the education system here in the universities, you know that you don't generally go to A&M for an English degree, but that's okay. That's what I ended up with. So, after that was a little bit of time of just kind of finding myself. I worked in, just kind of some of those typical right after college retail and I did a couple of years in customer service for a financial industries company. And then I ended up for 5 or 6 years working for a cooperative group that did cancer clinical trials nationally and in grant management, and got my master's while I was doing that, and still mulling over in my head, maybe now is the time for law school when it's done. And when I finished, that was what my husband said. He said, if you're gonna go to law school, this is the time to do it. And so I was lucky enough that I had his full support. I already had I had a 2-year-old when I started law school. I had a baby at the end of my 1L year. And then when I finished law school, I briefed for the Chief Justice of the Appellate Court in our district. And I was pregnant with my third baby during that year. And that was largely in part because the Chief Justice, Catherine Stone, an incredible woman, an incredible trailblazer in the Texas legal community and in the judiciary. And she was just, she still is a great mentor and friend. And she kind of, I don't want to say gave me that permission I needed, but I knew that I knew I wanted to grow my family, and I knew she would support it and make it work. And she did. So I worked for the appellate court, and then I needed a job. And I kind of wanted to stay in appellate law, but I ran into a pretty familiar roadblock in that while I was in my briefing year, I was, like I said, pregnant, and I got many an interview. But as soon as they saw that I was pregnant, I was, not of interest to them at all.
Really? Wow.
Really, really.
Outright discrimination, huh?
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah, yeah. So that was super frustrating and scary. You put all this money into a law degree, and I've got a family, third on the way. And so, my husband and I just decided to take a leap of faith because I was due in June, and my clerkship went through August, and I didn't have a job, and he wasn't super happy with what he was doing. So we decided he was going to quit his job and stay home with the baby after I had her. And I would go right back to my clerkship so that I could look for a job. And sure enough, that's what he did. And within 2 weeks of returning back to the court, I had a firm position because I wasn't pregnant anymore. So,
Oh my goodness.
yeah. So
How
that was
many
my.
years ago are we talking about?
I'm
Hold
sorry.
on. Not to get personal with your age, but
Sure.
like this discrimination happened how many years ago? What's
Well, let's see. That baby girl she's 12 now. 12 now.
okay.
12 years
Gosh,
old.
that's not long ago to have to go
Yeah,
through
no,
puberty
no,
challenge.
not. It's not.
Wow.
So that
So
was my first experience with the challenges, direct experience with the challenges that women face in
wow,
the legal
so
field.
much there to unpack.
Yeah.
First of all, I want to go unpack this fabulous story of yours with your decision to not go to law school when you did, but to go later. Like that is so important for us women to hear. I mean, everybody who's listening is probably already a lawyer, but how did you make that decision so solidly for yourself that you weren't ready?
Well, at that time, I mean, this could be hours of talk, and it wouldn't be interesting to anybody but myself, and maybe you a little bit. But at the time, I was in an interesting situation in that I was one of those that in high school I did really, really well, top of my class. And so, and like I said, got this scholarship, went to A&M, was expected to do great things. And when I got to A&M, I hit a wall and I didn't do well. I did well enough to keep my scholarship, but it was the first time that I was really challenged academically. And what I didn't know then, and I didn't find out until after law school actually, was that I had ADD. And so I was that was the first time I was, I couldn't just cope. I didn't know, this was in 92, 93, and ADD wasn't diagnosed as much then. It was when you thought ADD, you thought ADHD, hyperactivity, and all that. And so I didn't know, and I didn't know why I was being challenged that way. And so that was a real blow to my confidence level. And so I just decided when I was thinking about law school that I wasn't there mentally. That I was dealing with all of these misgivings and what's wrong with me, why am I not performing up to my potential. And so the thought of going into law, I was just not going to put myself in that situation in law school, especially because I was in one of those pre-law groups, and you meet law students come in to talk, and they're all kind of badass, cutthroat, whatever. And I just thought, oh my, I could not handle that. Like I could not handle that level of competition. So I had a lot of misgivings about myself and my ability to perform. So I think that was one of the gifts, and it was one of many. I'm so glad I didn't go right after college. I think there are just so many advantages that are gained by not only working before you go to law school, but also having a family. Everybody acted like it was crazy that I came to law school with a 2-year-old and then got pregnant. But really, after having been in the real world, it just wasn't. I always told everybody this is no harder than working full time with an infant and toddler.
Oh, I
This is
love
no,
that perspective
you know,
because I think you put any adverse situation in such perspective when you have a life outside of it,
Right.
right? I
Right.
was one of those that went straight through law school, and I would always look up to the people that were night students, right? Or I
Hmm.
was like,
Hmm.
I could barely like manage my own little pathetic life of being a law student full time, and I would see these
Right.
people like just with the suit at the end of the day coming when I was leaving, right? Because I
Right.
was done for the day, and I'm like, when do they study? When do they eat? When do they sleep? Right?
Hmm.
So I have a huge admiration for the people that did law school while they did something else, because I do think it's really, and I want the listeners to really get this. We're already practicing lawyers as we're listening to this, but where in your life does resiliency not seem like an option because we're not looking at the big picture? Like there is way more than that one issue you're tackling or
Right.
that one thing on your plate. And if you step back and look at your whole life, you see that there's a lot more to this, right? This is not the end all crisis of the world. Like we had plumbing problems and we didn't have water for close to a week. And I was like, okay, Katie, running water is a luxury. There are people that don't have drinking water. And so aren't you grateful the next time you have water and you can just turn on that faucet and there's water, right? So
Right.
you get to step back and look at the bigger picture. And I just love the fact that you really took care of yourself and paused and reflected on what would work for you, and you did it. And honestly, I don't know if I could have done it with a child and then another
Could have.
one. Really do like, but perhaps I could have. It just
Could have.
it would have probably been something that I would have thought not so important. Law school, I got all this other stuff going on. Let's
Right.
put it in perspective. I love
Right.
that.
Right. Right.
In life, can we do that in general? So now you and I met because of this leads program. Tell me, how did you get to I know you're one of the first champions of this program and put it together. How did you guys get to this place? And tell us about it so we can learn.
Yeah, absolutely. So this program is it is a program of the Bear County Women's Bar Foundation, and so it is my baby. I love it, and so I'm always happy to talk about it. Thank you for giving me the opportunity today.
My
Um,
pleasure.
so I became involved with the Bear County Women's Bar Foundation and Association and Foundation here in San Antonio when I was in law school. When I was in law school, I was president of the Women's Law Association at the law school, and so that position has a seat, on the board of the Bear County Women's Bar Association. Which, again, what a blessing! And that was actually the advice of a good friend of mine who did law school right out of college, and I'm going down a squirrel here a little bit, but when I was talking to her about whether or not I could do this, like, I'm not sure I can do this. I'm going to have a 2-year-old. She's like, you absolutely can. She said, but what you have to do is get in there and, find your people, because you need your support network. And that is a theme that runs all the way through and up to LEAD, and why the Elite Academy now is so the support network is just a critical component of it. So, but anyway, I was president of the Women's Law Association and on the board, and just met these phenomenal women. And so as soon as I finished law school, I ran for the board. Didn't make it the first year. Wasn't elected. Nobody knew who I was, I'm sure. But then they had somebody leave, and I was next up on the results or whatever. And so I was asked to come on and fill a position, and I moved through. And in 2014, I was president of the Women's Bar. And we were looking for a new program that the bar could offer. We were always looking to offer something to the community, and usually it's something aimed at women or children in the community. The Women's Bar here formed a wills clinic that they ran for several years and then transferred to the community justice program. It put together an elder law handbook that was distributed throughout the community, and eventually the elder law section of the San Antonio Bar, we transferred it over to them to run. And so we were always looking for something new. And again, this is 2014. At the same time that I'm president and kind of running some, brainstorming meetings and stuff to figure out what should be the next big project, I'm looking for leadership training. I'm looking for a program that I can personally enroll in. Obviously, by then, maybe it's too late as far as my president. I was already president of the association, but I wanted to focus on and do some training on developing into a better leader. And I couldn't find anything. And so I started having discussions in the context of those brainstorming sessions with women attorneys that had been practicing a long time and women judges here in San Antonio. And almost all of them said, putting together a program for the community of San Antonio is great, but there are needs here in our own legal community, the women in our legal community, that need to be met. And so we should turn our view to that. And that just kind of fortuitously was at the same time I'm looking for a leadership program and can't find one. And so I started brainstorming, well, what about this? What if we put together some sort of leadership development program for women attorneys in San Antonio? And one of the issues we wanted, it wasn't just leadership development, it was holding on to women in the legal profession. Because at the time,
Yes.
The National Association of Women Lawyers, and I don't remember the exact numbers, might get a little bit wrong, but they did a study in like 2008, I think, I'm not sure. And it showed that women were coming out of law school at 50%. But by the time you got up to the upper levels of, equity partners and name partners and C-suite, women were only represented about 13%, of 13 to 15, I think, in those seats. And so there was this push to increase it up to closer to 20% over the next 10 years. And 10 years later, there had been really no movement at all. And what you find out if you dig down into the research and the information is that so many women are hitting walls and quitting, for the same reason. I think there are a lot of professions that women start out and then they get to a certain level and it's just too much and they quit. So what we did with this program is we developed something that not only worked on leadership development, but really has a strong focus on self-reflection and empowerment and discovering what your strengths are and what makes you a good lawyer, and what to do when you hit a barrier. What can we teach you that will keep you from quitting? Honestly, it's like, let's give you the tools that if you're working in a big firm, you're banging your head against the wall, you're trying to get up to partner, you are you're hitting issues related to moving up to partner, wanting to have children, dealing with everything that goes with this. And you'll see I stay very far away from work-life balance because I don't think it exists. I think you do the best you can, but I don't think there's a balance. So what are your options, right? So what can you do? And so that's what we did. We developed a program. We very luckily, there are great books out there written about women leaders and traits that make a good leader. There's actually one written, it was published by the ABA, and the author is Jindy Vincent out of Houston. And she wrote this amazing book that covered the traits of successful women lawyers. And I was thankful because that meant, she had done all the research and I just got to read her summary and it was awesome. So I got to pick and choose, and I actually met with her and said, hey, this is what we're looking at doing. And she's a phenomenal attorney and leader here in Texas. We met in Austin. She was there to meet with a client. I was there for a CLE, and I said, hey, let's grab lunch, and 3 hours later, she had given me so many ideas about what to do and what we could focus on. And since then, she's been a faculty member every year. She comes and teaches every year.
Wow.
So,
Yeah, no, go ahead and finish your thought.
Oh no. And so we really relied on that information to come up with a curriculum and to put this program together. And I think it's become really important. We've seen the lasting effects of it. We have seen how when you teach women to look at what their strengths are and what did you really want to do when you went to law school, right? Because I think some people go to law school and you're educated to believe there's only one way to be successful generally, and that's to be in a big firm making the big bucks and all of that. And so I think when you kind of come back to, okay, we as women have had to practice like men for so long, we don't need to do that anymore. I mean, that is something that our trailblazers have very thankfully, a lot of those barriers have been brought down. You don't have to dress in the men's suit and, change how you act and perform necessarily to be a good attorney. So what do you want to do? What kind of lawyer do you want to be? And maybe that doesn't line up with the big firm job that you have. If you're really wanting to do something different, well, let's talk about it and talk about what's the best way to make that happen. And so we've seen
I
huge
love this.
transformation. Yeah.
Yeah, I love this because you know what I love about this program for all of you guys that are listening. If you listen to Tiffany closely, she wasn't talking about changing the world out there and how law is practiced. While that's a very good thing to think about, it's also rather disempowering, I found, because change is created within us and then we show up differently and we role model it and others either comport and adapt and follow us or don't, right? And that's how movements grow. But when we're constantly focused on the men are doing it this way and they're doing this to us, then we victimize ourselves. And the facts may prove that out. I'm not denying that. I have sat
Right.
in many of those situations, as I'm sure you have, as I'm sure every woman listening here has. But that doesn't help us any, right? And then we become the bitchs that are complaining, right? And actually the men that get it can't even help us when we come from that place, or
Right.
good helping, just being part of the team together. It doesn't move mountains, but this program of yours really does, because it focuses on, let's go inside and figure out what you want to do, who you are, and then how we can bring that to the world in the best way, as a human, as a lawyer, right? As a mom,
Right.
as a woman. And I think there's real beauty in that. So you said you've seen huge transformations. Give us, if you can remember, which I'm sure you've got so many examples over the years since this started in 2014, what's one transformation that really sticks out for you without, confidentiality, disclosing any
Sure, sure. Well, there's several of our class members that have made pivots in their practice and what they do, and they've told us that they specifically attribute it to what they learned and gained and the confidence that they gained in the program. We've had attorneys that worked large firm and decided, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to do something different, and so they left and went to other firms. We've had women that have gone from being in firms to being in house. We've had women that have gone from, working in the, not 20-hour day job, but, working in that environment where you have that mindset of basically more work is more, to finding a firm environment that appreciated them for who they were and the quality of what they did rather than the quantity of what they did, and being able to kind of parse out what is important to me, what's going to make me a successful lawyer, and therefore a mentor and example for other women in the field. And then also, what can I do to help other women behind me? I think what is fascinating to me about the story too, though, is how it impacted me. When we started the program, we were thinking, okay, this is probably for, attorneys that have been practicing a lower number of years, maybe 3 to 7 at max. This is more of a, we don't want you to be a 1 or 2 year attorney necessarily, because you're still learning to be an attorney, right? And that takes all your focus. But we want to
Yes.
look at somebody that's like 3 to 7 years. And we were fascinated at first because, again, we're making this up, so we're figuring it out as we go along. When these women were applying, there was a range of practicing from 1 year to 17, 18 years. And we were like, oh my gosh, what could they possibly learn? Some of us hadn't been practicing 17 to 18 years yet. And so we did, though, because of that, we broadened our scope. We're always paying attention to what's going on. And, should we make changes accordingly or not? Let's pay attention and not assume that we're doing it. We're always doing it right. Let's see if there's something that can be improved. So anyway, because of that, it is fascinating that the steering committee members, who are all more experienced attorneys, ranging usually from 10 years and up, we're getting just as much out of that program as anybody else. And when I started the program, I was working at a mid-sized firm. And during those years, I became a partner. And, there were some issues I was coming up against, and I wasn't happy with them. But I had convinced myself for years that I never wanted to open my own firm. I didn't want to do that. That's too much of a headache. That's ridiculous. Hey, good for everybody that does that, but I don't. That's just not something I would ever want to do. I don't want that responsibility. And it really was, as I'm sitting through the lead program for probably the third class year, that I came to the kind of light bulb moment, like, you're scared. you want to do this, but you're
Yeah.
scared that you can't. You're scared you're going to fail. And it was because of what we teach in Lead about recognizing your vulnerabilities, about reaching out to your networks of people and talking about what you want to do and what you're scared about and what are solutions, and recognizing what your strengths are. And that was one of the reasons I was scared. Like I know what my weaknesses are. I am a what you would we call, if you, depending on what kind of assessments you do or whatever, a visionary, right? I'm not an integrator and implementer. I'm a visionary.
Me
And
too.
so I recognized that to make something like this work, I had to work with people who could fill in the gaps with what my strengths were. But it really was quite a humbling moment when I realized if we hadn't started Lead, I would probably still be in that job, making a lot of money for other people. Um,
Wow,
you
that
know,
is
yeah,
amazing.
yeah,
Well, thank you so much for honestly
yeah,
sharing. Because I think it really should move a lot of the listeners to having self-awareness and knowing really, I mean, everything that we teach or, you're enabling the teaching is what we're learning too, right? Every time I teach
absolutely.
on my topic, I'm learning too because we teach what we're learning and growing around. It just so happens that, the teacher is 7 to 10 years ahead of the students and can
Right,
see where they're coming at and can give
right.
that advice and that teaching, but it's
Yeah,
all the same. If we're not growing and learning, then how can we be teaching? So good
right,
on you for being so open. I really honor and admire you for being so open to change and really listening to your heart and to your inner voice and intuition. Honestly, I keep telling women lawyers that that is a healing element for us
right,
when we listen to our inner voice and we know that that is a skill, not a skill, natural talent women have, right?
right,
But really going in deep and listening to our inner voice, there's a healing that happens, but that healing then impacts, it ripples out across to everybody we touch. And look where you are now and how much bigger the program has become. And I know you didn't do it alone and you're very humble in pointing that out.
absolutely not. Yeah,
I don't even know how you manage to do all the stuff you do from the time when you were in law school and just always, it's amazing how much capacity we have as women. Not that men don't, we're not comparing and contrasting, but just looking at how much capacity we have to learn and manage and juggle and do everything well. And I agree with you. It's not balance. I call it harmony because it ebbs and
right,
flows just like
right,
life. And it
right,
really is that way. So if you are listening, women out there, Tiffanie and her colleagues made this happen in San Antonio, in Texas, really. So there's got to be a way for you to have some kind of capacity to bring education to women lawyers. Look at how this happened, and it's successful. And it doesn't mean that it can't be done different ways, but just by
right,
people putting their focus on it and saying, I want this for myself. I can't find it. I'm going to create it for
right,
myself and for other women, really, while I'm at it. And then that's just how great thoughts start and grow. So I'm hoping you all are inspired by this because it's not just inspirational, it's really inspirational, but it's pragmatic. And the results touch the creator as well. So
right,
good
right.
on you. It's a win-win all around.
It
So
is.
now I want to pivot to you. What's going on? This is the portion of the program where we talk about what's on your plate and how can we support you. What's one challenge you got on your plate and how can I support you through thinking about it and coaching you a little bit on where to go with next steps, or we can just
Right.
brainstorm together.
Yeah. I think, gosh, there's always several challenges. It's usually not an issue to identify one. But I think what I'm finding right now, and I think a lot of people are dealing with it, is no matter where you're situated and what kind of firm or where you're working, but we're all dealing with COVID fatigue. Obviously, I'm the my decision to open a firm happened to occur right before the pandemic, and so it absolutely kind of changed how the plans went, right? I had this great business development plan and how I was going to expand and what have you. And then COVID hit and everything changed. So I think as we're still obviously facing challenges, But I think as we are coming out of COVID, my biggest challenge is trying to figure out how to re enter, honestly, the business development realm from the perspective of everything has been through Zoom and email and what have you, and kind of put a hold on it to an extent. And so trying to figure out in an already busy world, because even though COVID happened, the business didn't go away. For better or worse, people still needed attorneys, even especially business attorneys during the pandemic. But now I feel like trying to reset and be like, okay, this is the new normal for now. What do I do to increase my capacity for reaching out to others and doing business development so that I can promote a business when we're still kind of in this half in, half out COVID world?
Yeah, that's an excellent query because, like you said, I think it should be everyone's query. I don't think, how could it not be? And if you're not thinking about it the way Tiffany is, I encourage you to stop, take a deep breath, and look at it, because it isn't going back to a normal, it's going forward to creating a new process. So the biggest thing I encourage you to focus on is, don't look externally yet.
Mm-hmm.
Go internal and figure out, what about the process during COVID worked best for you?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And how would you like to take that forward and make it work for you? I think a lot of us, the reason I say don't go external is because a lot of us do, and we're starting to look at other people and how they're doing it. And that's where the breakdown happens, because what works for other people may not work for you and your client base. And only you know that well. And
Right.
having had a taste of COVID, the benefits of it, you may say, I really like that. Like, I have a client, immigration lawyer, who
Mm-hmm.
during COVID just got it all together, and she's solo. She said, you know what? I really like this virtual thing. She got rid of her entire staff, got rid of her
Wow.
$5,000 a month overhead for her office. And now she had that because her lease, her 5-year lease, was just coming to an end there. So she's just virtual, and she says, I like this. I can see more clients this way because I don't have the downtime of having to escort them to the elevator or having to
Right.
deal with staff to do that. And then, the chit chat time is minimal. And she says, and then I have an office space if I do need to see them because they need to sign something. It's separate. She said, it just makes sense for me. And I like having the virtual assistants. So she just completely changed gears. And I have a financial advisor client who did the exact same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so people are really, at least the ones that work with me, I encourage you, go inside. What are your natural strengths, Tiffany? What has really worked well for you and what hasn't? For me, well, what hasn't, as an example, is, well, beyond the obvious of the COVID, I'm an extrovert. I have really missed seeing people
Right.
outside of the virtual space. I really enjoyed dressing up. Like I really, it's just part of who I am,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Instead of like, in the middle of COVID, I'm like, oh my God, I'm wearing the same pair of jeans every day. I just keep washing and wearing them. Like literally, it's like become the uniform with a different shirt on. Like, I just can't live that way. That's not natural for me, right?
Right.
So how to balance that out, and then you take a pen to paper and create that for yourself. And because it really is a reset button we have, and I'm glad you're pointing that out, but it should be a reset button based on what works for us as humans rather than what, well, we've always done it this way. And the
Right.
problem is, the bigger firms are running that danger because they're forcing people to pick. Or what's worse, and I encourage you not to do this because you have the option, is this whole hybrid, quote unquote, model, where women are losing their minds. Because if you got small children at home, whatnot, actually, I sort of lose my mind because I'm at home recording this now, but I could have very well been in the office because I come and go.
Right.
Sometimes I can't find my files because not everything's up in the cloud, and I'm like, and where did I leave that charger or whatnot? Whereas everything used to always be at the office. So
Right.
the hybrid model is a little lacking, I think, because people can't have all their stuff in two places and be running back and forth. It just takes away from people's attention and their ability to ground for 8 hours somewhere. It's good for flexibility, but I wonder. So for me, it doesn't work as well. Maybe somebody listening is like, oh, I love the hybrid model. I got it down pat. But what works for you? And then look at it from a perspective of how exciting is this that I get to create this going forward? And I get to
Right.
pick what kind of business development efforts I choose to look at. And how can you create new business development efforts? Because you're a creator, right? Like you
Right.
said, you're a visionary like I am. How can I create something that works for me in terms of business development? Let's put that out there and tell other women, does this work for you? What if we stopped, instead of having monthly lunches, we looked at it differently and had a different perspective on it?
Right.
Bring think tank together and co-create. You don't
Right.
have to do this in a vacuum, which I think you know, but sometimes when it comes to one particular thing like business development, it brings us a lot of angst because the pressure is on. Like I was just working with a client in a big firm, and she was like, I'm a partner, but the partner in charge came and said, and tied to her compensation for the end of the year, said, we really think you are a much bigger producer than you think you are, a much bigger rainmaker. So her goal has now been moved to a 7-figure goal and beyond. And she says, I am panicking because I've got children at home. I don't even know where to start with this, right? And that's all business development. And she's a deep introvert. And so we really had to work through that you got this because you know who you are. She's been through my program and you have your full on tools in your toolbox. So you get to decide what business development looks like for you. And you get to really do decide what that dollar amount looks like too, even though the firm says one thing, but they're not doing the work and showing up and doing the business development. So you got to decide. So same for you being a solo, really the empowerment of I get to create the experience I want around business development.
Right, right. And I think it's fascinating. You bring up so many good points, but one of the fears I had, and this kind of goes back to how Lead helped me out, was I thought, oh, I could never get clients. I could never get clients. Now the irony of that is I was bringing clients in all over the place for where I was working. It was organic and it wasn't on purpose. You know what I mean? It wasn't.
The
It
best kind.
It just was. And so I remember the very first lead symposium that we had with the first class, we had a speaker about rainmaking, and she used me as an example of somebody who had all of the qualities needed for rainmaking. And I thought, she clearly does not know me well because I am not a rainmaker at all. Like, this is terrible. But then in listening to her, that was another one of those aha moments, was like, you just stop thinking about it like you're out to make a deal and get a client, and just look at it as relationships. And that has really changed everything for me. It made me realize you don't, you're feeling, for lack of a better word, yucky about that. You're having these conversations and making these relationships because you want business. And when you realize that's not what it is making a relationship for the relationship. And if business comes from it, fantastic. It really changed everything, for us. And so it goes really well. Now I joke, I started out with just myself, and an associate that was working for me came over with me, and now she is my partner, actually becoming name partner next year.
Oh,
Yeah. And then we have another associate. So there's three of us. And but it is funny because now I'm working on her the same way, because she is always saying, I'm an introvert, business development is you. I'm like, nope, you're my partner now, and we're gonna work on this together. I'm gonna show you it's not as scary as it sounds.
yes. No. So you've got all that dialed in and you really do have the personality for it. So just evolve it and recreate it. But I think the hardest part is sitting there and figuring out what you desire and what you want out of
Right,
it going
right,
forward, because you don't have a model for it,
right,
right? And,
exactly. Exactly.
and
Everybody's like,
so,
put together a marketing plan. I'm like, a marketing plan? What do and anyway,
yeah,
so it's,
don't
it's one
call
of
it
the
that. You know
super
how to do it.
overwhelming.
Yeah, no, but don't use those technical terms like marketing plan, like you said
Yeah,
about the N word, networking. Just show up and do what you naturally do. Just own it from that place of, you know what, I'm just going to do what I do, but I'm going to identify what it is I do so I can not recreate the wheel, but come at it with
right.
intention and focus and clarity. And then pardon my language, screw how everybody else wants to do
Right.
it and what
Yeah.
they call it. I'm just going to do it my way. And so take all the pressure off from yourself that it has to be done a certain way and a marketing plan. Nobody even knows what that means because there's so many different variations, and there's not a cookie cutter plan because you're a human with attributes and
Right.
facets and assets
Right.
that you clearly get to delineate, nobody else.
Right. Right.
So,
Exactly.
on that note, I hope that was helpful.
It was
I
very
want
helpful. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. I want to thank you for bringing this instrumental learning that you got and this beautiful program that you created to my audience. I hope, as your audience, you guys have been learning from Tiffanie because she's remarkable and she multitasks and does it all, just like all of you guys who are listening. Truly, as women, I'm always just in deep admiration of women lawyers just doing what we do the way we do it and
True.
showing up all the time. Seriously, it's amazing to me. And I know there's plenty of men out there that appreciate that too. And for them, we thank them for their support and their collegiality in being our colleagues and our spouses and our significant
Right.
others and partners, really. So if we want to get a hold of you, Tiffanie, if somebody's got a question, where can they find you? Or they just want to
Oh,
learn more about you?
yeah, yeah. You can absolutely find us in a couple different places. If you go to the Bear County Women's Bar Association website, there is a page for the Lead Academy. And so there's a lot of great information there. So Bear County Women's Bar, and Bear is BEXAR, Bear County Women's Bar Association.org to find out more about the Lead Academy. And then as far as myself, our law firm is at clausewitzlaw.com. That's CLAUSEWITZ law.com. And there's information there. And I'm on LinkedIn. So,
Beautiful.
yeah.
Fantastic. Any last words you want to leave us with?
I think one thing I would want to stress, I'm not sure I got it in enough, that for all the teaching and the education that Lead does, what has become the most important thing is realizing the strength that we have and we gain from other women. We can teach all day long, and that was the development of the curriculum and the education that was very important at the beginning. What we didn't realize, but we learned very quickly, that the women absolutely learned from the curriculum. They learned more from each other. It was less
Oh,
about what they were learning and more about the connections they were making. And the transformation is because of what they're learning, but it's more because they now have a network of supportive women who are telling them, yes, you can, you really can. And so I think that is just, it's so critical, especially for women out there and on, women leaders that are out there. I think they've already figured this out, but it's hard to do anything in a silo. It's hard to do anything when you don't have a supportive network. And so this program has built this community of women. We have about 3 or 4 text chains with different groups, and it's everything. The remarks in there are everything from a technical procedural question to, have you been in front of this judge, to, did y'all see the new lipstick color at Sephora, to, oh my God, who wants my children? So, it's benign. It goes on all day long. We all joke about how our partners will say, please turn the notifications off because it is beeping all the time. Our phones are ding, ding, dinging. But that's how I got to where I am, is because there was this group of women. If it had just been me, this program would not have happened, because I had a great vision, but I could not get it off the ground until I got this steering committee of women with everything, all of the, again, filling in the gaps. Everybody has different strengths, and it's only because of them that the program became a reality. And those women are my everything. I mean, they're so anyway, I just think everybody has the capacity to do what they want to do, but if you've got to have that supportive network around you to help you see what you're missing, and encourage you and tell you can do it and help you figure out how to.
wow, that just gave me goosebumps. It's just such a beautiful thought that support is everything. And
Mhm.
until you reach out and you say it, and you can be the visionary, but it really takes so many people. I sometimes
Yes,
stop and think about that from my own life. And I think about all the people that really have gotten me to where I am today.
right, right.
Do the exercise for yourself, listeners. Just stop and think about how you got to where you are, and think about all the people, from the guy who cuts your hair or the gal who cuts your hair, to the, I don't know, to the grocery store guy that, make sure when they ask you, did you find everything okay? You're like, well, I need this for my babies, whatever. Like, people have really gotten you there, some in a bigger fashion than others, but it really does take support. And I love the fact that we're ending on that note.
Mhm.
It has been my pleasure to have you, Tiffanie. I look forward to working with your Lead Academy group. Thank you for reaching out to me, and thank you for bringing this wisdom to our audience. Women listening to this, I hope you take this and extract from it what works for you, that really resonates with your soul and your heart, so you can heal and take that healing forward and make a difference in your legal community, make a difference for other people, other women, whoever you come in contact with, whether it's your client or not, and touch them and make the world a better place for all of us. It really is the goal, inner peace and happiness. It's not
Right.
woo woo, it's real. We just have to do it our way and extract what we can from other people's wisdom and take it to heart. So thanks for having the time and the patience to create space to come join me. I really appreciate it. And
Absolutely. Thank you for
loyal
creating
function.
this forum. This forum is amazing. Thank you for your
Oh,
podcast and all that you do for women in the legal
you're so welcome.